All right, so let's go ahead and get started. So again, this is, can everybody see it okay? Just make sure, okay, all right, perfect. So today what we're going to talk about is the definition of discipleship. You would be amazed how many people have varying definitions of discipleship. Even our NextGen coordinators had a spiritual and it was like a solitude retreat. And this was one of the topics we talked about is what is discipleship. We're also going to talk about current challenges in the discipleship model within NextGen Ministries and also family ministries. We're going to also look at NextGen intentional discipleship, which involves the heads, hand, heart, and parents. And then at the end, we're going to share some creative ways to disciple. As we move along, there will be some questions that I'll stop and we'll discuss it as a group because I think it's always good for us to get ideas from other people. I encourage you that if you want to connect with somebody on the call, if you hear a great idea or a great resource and you want to learn more about it, please share your email and make sure you leave in the chat who you would like that resource from and follow up after the meeting. I don't want this meeting just to be a training. I want it to be a connection point as well. So the definitions of discipleship is the intentional development of followers of Jesus. Okay, so it's developing the people in their walk with Jesus. But today we're really going to be looking at the formational discipleship. This is how someone is formed, shaped, and nurtured in this walk with Jesus. And one of the areas that a lot of churches miss and we don't always look at in a holistic viewpoint is parents, guardians, and families. And when I say guardians and families, we have a rise of kids being put into out of house placement, either they're with grandparents or they're with aunts, uncles, or they're in the foster care or even juvenile group homes. So we need to understand the dynamic of who are the caregivers of each child and youth. Helps if I go the right direction. So we're going to go ahead and stop here. And I would really like to know from each of you, how are you discipling your kids, youth, and young adults at your church? So I'd like you to go ahead and just drop that in the chat. And then I'm going to look at the chat and we're going to go ahead and just kind of share with each other. Actually, since it's such a small group, honestly, let's just unmute. And if you guys don't mind sharing how you disciple kids, youth, and young adults in your church.
For our kids, we leave our Sunday mornings for just a general teachings about Jesus, but our Wednesday nights have been more discipleship focused. And we really kind of hit hard the journaling aspect of the word and journaling our Bible verses. We've been using our SOAP journals, and that's been kind of what we've been focusing on lately.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's awesome. Do you know what your youth do? What is kind of like the discipleship model for your youth?
Yeah, they do. Right now they're learning specific things in the Old Testament and how they apply to life now. And so they just do a small group setting. So they do a large group and then they break down into small groups within the Wednesday night thing. And then they also do a Tuesday night preparing for kind of evangelism type things. So for instance, on Tuesday nights, they get together and we've incorporated where they teach the younger kids a lesson. So they'll come in, kind of brainstorm, kind of go through their lesson that they're going to teach to the younger kids, and they work together on what that looks like and how they can share with the younger kids on Wednesday nights. And so that's kind of been another piece that they use we only have Tuesday and Wednesday nights for the youth. They do special events, but on Sunday they are just within the main church service. And we don't currently have young adults age
Okay.
group meeting. If they do, if they are at church, they just join a small group and just kind of
Okay.
jump in that way. They don't have a specific place to go, I guess you could say.
No, that's perfect. That's perfect. Amanda, I know that you're a church plant, but do you have any suggestions on, I know formally like children's pastor and stuff, did you have some discipleship tools that you use formally?
Um, Currently, we actually use the family discipleship model. And so we have a family church setting where it's all one big room and we're all together all the time. So we really focus in on discipling the parents first, but the children learn the lessons as well, right along with. And then they take it out into their homes and then
Okay.
put it to action. So that's kind of the model we're at right now.
Okay, awesome. Courtney, do you have anything to share? I saw that you loved like what Amy and Lauren were sharing.
Yeah, I really like that as an idea just because we're not a huge church, so we have like 4 through like 12-year-olds in a room, and it can be kind of difficult to teach that range of ages at the same time, but we just make it work. But yeah, we actually just started using the Grow curriculum, and I really like their discipleship techniques. So we're kind of getting the younger kids and the ones that aren't as familiar with even like flipping through the Bible, like physically in the Bible, because I find that the younger ones don't, they're not even there yet. They're not even
Yeah,
flipping through the word. But that's kind of what we're going into, is going into the Bible buddies is the next thing. So they're all going to get Bible buddies, but to just teach them those, like the things that sustain us as adults, teaching them how to do those things and doing them next to
yeah,
them, doing a soap together. And we've been focusing to, with the younger kids especially, on just like praying over each other, just those like you know, practical things in life that they sometimes just need to be like shown and demonstrated. So we've been doing that, and then I've also been liking some of the literature stuff that I've been getting from Grow, or sometimes I'll see it on like Foursquare NextGen, of like books for parents and things like that. I think that's been
hmm
really, I've been having good responses with that, is resourcing the parents with things to read, because sometimes they don't know where to start. So I
yeah,
think that's kind of
that's
where
great.
we're at right now.
Yeah, so just so you know, I'm a small church too, and I'm a part of a church plant, and it's an intergenerational like Amanda's. And what we're doing currently is I've started a Monday night discipleship. So we don't do games, we don't do anything like that. This is a spiritual development journey, and we're using a resource called Unique for students. And so we're like on week 4, and it's just amazing. So it's really looking at their identity and how God's uniquely woven them together. And then alongside of that, I've been sending home resources for parents. So what the kids learn, I'm actually sending to the parents so they can walk the same journey as their kids are. And then some talking points to have follow up at home. So those are really great ideas, everyone. So thank you so much for sharing. We're going to go ahead and get back to the slides. And all of you mentioned, just different programmings, different ways that you guys do things. So I am so sorry, these slides, every time I push it, it goes the wrong direction. So when we're looking at the holistic approach, as and having knowledge as next gen leaders, we need to understand like the human development, how they grow. A lot of times we think of like cognitive growth, and we think of physical growth and those milestones that they all have. But there's actually a spiritual growth continuum as well, and understanding that even parents are going at different levels, and you might come to a point where you will see a teen that's actually more developed in their spiritual walk with Jesus than actually the parents are. So this is kind of like where things get a little different, but like the physical, it's milestones. You know, we see these developments along the way. So we need to understand the development of human and child development, and then also the cultural context. If we're looking at the holistic approach, we need to understand the culture that the child lives in. So are they living in a multicultural home? Are they living in an intergenerational home? Do they have one parent? Are they living in a foster home? Are they living in a group home? Also, do they have relatives? I have a child that has autism, and so I think it's good to understand, is there anybody in the home that maybe has special needs? Also, looking at the whole child as well. Like, do we understand where they are mentally? And when I mean mentally, we're seeing like this huge influx of kids, even at our camps. A lot of our camps, the nurses, we've actually had to see if we could find two people, one to administer meds and one just to do first aid, or two people to administer meds, because there's so many medications, because we've seen an influx of anxiety and depression and just other things that kids are dealing with. Also understanding the physical of the child, the emotional, and the social and family. The kids may be with you an hour, but what are they going home to? The kids may be with you an hour a week, but what is their school environment like? Are they bullied? Are they ostracized? Are they the popular kid? Are they high performance to seek attention? There's a lot of different things that we could look at in each of the children. Also, one thing that I challenge is that the vision and mission of the church. I just want to say, do your ministries for kids, youth, and young adults use the same missional approach? And the reason I say that is sometimes we unintentionally silo our NextGen ministries. So if we're looking at the holistic approach for kids, and the senior pastor has this mission statement or this vision for how they're going to reach the church, parents, older people, are we applying that even to the kids? So just to give an example, I was working at a church as a NextGen ministry, and so I oversaw children and youth. And one of the things that I realized, it was an aha moment, is that the mission for our church was pursue, influence, and multiply. And it was based off of the Samaritan woman at the well, how Jesus pursued her, how he influenced her, and then how she brought other people out. And it multiplied, spreading the gospel. And so they had different objectives that they worked on as a church. Well, I got to thinking, we're doing something totally sidetracked, and we're not even doing the same mission. So what I did is I took my whole team and we sat down. I talked to the senior pastor. I said, I feel like this is what we need to do. And we sat down and we went through children's ministry team. And then we also went through youth ministry team. And we figured out, what does pursue look like in children's ministry? What does influence look like in each of those NextGen ministries? And what does multiply look like? What are the things and the goals that we're going to set, that we're hitting that vision and mission of the church? And it was unified. Everybody was on board and everybody was moving in the same direction. So each church is different, each context is different. So if you feel like that's something you would like to discuss with your senior pastor, go for it. If you feel like what you're doing is going well, but it just kind of brings the whole body of believers on the same vision and mission. So there's shift of focuses, not on church growth models like we used to have, but rather on discipleship. So statistics are showing that when we went through this church growth model, and then we had all this leadership development. Leadership development is important, but what happened is there was like a 10-year span there where we were highly focused on leadership development and like head knowledge and practice, that we lost discipleship. So when COVID hit, that's where everybody started to notice, oh my goodness, we have to really look at discipleship again. And so this is just something that I say when I talk to people, is the intentional discipleship of a single child and their family can have a profound impact on communities and future generations, spreading the message of Jesus. So when we're looking at this, some of people might watch this video, or even you think, I have 50 kids. How am I going to be this intentional with 50 kids? Well, this is where you shift your thinking, and instead of it being in the church, what are some things that you're going to do outside of the church? And this is why I put this map up, because when you look at this map, I find it really interesting, because Nebraska, I don't even know where. Nebraska would probably be up in the Canada range, the way this map is modeled. So if we were to use this to travel to each other's towns, we would not end up where we needed to be. This is an old map. And the old map was made by people just perceiving like measurements from walking or being on the ships, but they didn't have an aerial view. Now maps have changed because they're able to have a different perspective, and they're up high, in satellite imagery, also airplanes, and they're able to complete what the actual geographic land looks like. And there's a lot of people that are still operating in old models. They're operating in old maps. There's some of us that we're doing things that we've been doing for maybe 10, 20 years. And the culture is actually what they're calling VUCA right now. It is shifting so quickly. A course that I just took, they were talking about how it would take about 10 years for a trend to take place globally, like for a trend to really hit everywhere. And now with social media and with influencers, they're seeing that trends they call it like popcorn culture and trends. It's like there's a hot trend that goes on and then it fizzles out. And then we have another trend that pops up and then it fizzles out. So trends are coming and going constantly. And with that, we have to think about where the culture is. Jesus never changed. The Bible never changes. We know that. But we also have to look at what is going on in the culture, and are we keeping in line with what's going on in the culture, or have we lost it? One area that broke my heart was actually during COVID. I hate to bring up that word, but when COVID happened, what I saw happen was a lot of children's ministry and youth ministry in areas that were shut down. Everything went online except for those ministries, when people were at home and staying at place. And so that was a really hard season to see. And there was a lot of people that said that when the kids were not engaged in the TV, some were, but they lost a lot of them because they didn't have any resources for them online. And each area was a different context. But it was a really hard time. So are you currently using the old map? I encourage you just to evaluate and kind of look at, are we doing right now what Holy Spirit wants us to do, or are we just doing the same thing over and over and over? And again, each church is different. Each season is different with each church, and each church has a different context So you have to pray and evaluate that. Is that something that we need to look at and change? So we're going to stop the training slides again, but this is the question. What are some factors hindering NextGen discipleship currently in the culture, this VUCA fast-moving culture? What are some of those hindrances that you all are seeing?
One thing I've noticed is that we are in a generation right now where it takes two incomes to run a household. So you don't have the family dynamic of a mom per se at home raising the child, or even a dad, you know, whichever person's in that role. But that's one challenge.
Okay, so two parent incomes.
I would say, I think looking at the whole child is a challenge sometimes, because the whole child comes with struggles that we may not be equipped to deal with at a church setting. I also have noticed that I'm struggling with kids wanting to be there versus parents shipping their kids to be there. And I think that creates a different dynamic when the child wants to be there versus when, oh, my parents have made me come because whatever the reason may be.
Mm-hmm.
So then it feels more like I'm having to entertain them instead of disciple them.
Yeah. So do you feel like that's so you got kids that want to come that maybe parents aren't bringing them, so they don't have that opportunity, and then the opposite, parents forcing them to come and the kids are sitting there like you're having to pull them into the environment to engage?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, that's good.
I think with our youth, I have been pulled in more times than ever for behaviors. Like, used to be the kids would, come in, want to be there, want to enjoy their time with their friends and learn about the Lord. But now it's so weird that I'm having to come in and have discussions with parents about behaviors. And if this continues, they can't come. I'm like, what in the world? Like, this is not school, but I'm having to treat some of the behaviors as if I was a school because it's not safe. Right. So that has been very interesting to have to, I never thought I would have to handle it as if I was a school principal dealing with parents and children, marking up the bathroom, marking up the soundboard and all, that kind of stuff where I'm like, what is happening here? It's just
Right.
crazy.
So change in behaviors. Yeah. Wow. Yeah, it's true, for real, even at like our camps and everything too. So Courtney, what about you?
I mean, I can definitely agree with like all of the examples that have been given. It's I think after again the C word, after COVID, I think that everybody got out of rhythm, so it's hard to find that new rhythm. Even now, even like 3 years later, or however long it's been, um, just getting people to be consistent, even with coming to church, I've found that where it's like we see all the same people all the time, but it's not like the same kids every single week. It's like these kids come on this, the first and third Sunday, and these kids we see more on the second Sunday. So there's been a drop off of like consistency with
Yes.
coming. And that's hard to disciple and build relationship when you don't see them every week. It's very different than, I feel like before the pandemic, you saw the kids every single week and it was weird if they weren't there. So that I've been seeing. And then also just like, I feel like almost like a competition with the children's like resources as far as like social media and things like that, especially with the older kids, like the teenagers and the youth that, I mean, the whole world is like is accessible from their hands. So it's them, it's kind of bridging the gap of like, hey, I love you and I care about our relationship. So I have things for you that are better than whatever social media, whatever is crowding your time and your attention, I guess you could say, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Yeah, no, it does. Do you guys find sports and outside extracurricular activities play a part also in hindrance of your discipleship?
Oh, I've definitely seen a lot of that with like even just sports being on Sundays and being on your Wednesday nights or whatever, where they just really aren't allowed to miss. And it's like, I don't want to pull them out of sports because I think that's good for them, but I also am like, you need Jesus. So
Yeah, that's good. Does anybody else have anything to share? No. Okay. Those are all really good. And you hit a couple of them that I wanted to share tonight. Some of them are like the curriculum and programming. We've kind of settled into a rhythm that is actually discipleship. And so it's kind of like the framework, and it gives us a structure of sharing Jesus in, a weekly rhythm. But like Courtney was just saying, sometimes we don't see kids, but every other week or once a month. And so when we look at that, we also know that it's a lot with the parents, but also there's been an emphasis on doing for God. So remember the church leadership growth model that we were talking about, and how there was leadership development. And that's where a lot of kids were kind of like, they were plugged in to do this, do this, do this, but they're not being taught being with God, like being in the presence and just understanding solitude and silence and lectio divina, just being still before God. That it's not just about doing for God. Fragmented families, you guys have mentioned that. Single parents, neglect, drugs, foster parents, just different relative situation. The little list could go on and on and on. So if I miss somebody, please know I get it. And there's just a lot going on in the culture as well. A holistic understanding is not in play. Again, we were talking about how it's hard to have that engagement, like Lauren was saying, when you only see certain kids certain times, plus the church isn't equipped to deal with everything. And then no unified mission in the church, like we were talking about earlier. Also, maybe you might have some senior leadership, and this is like no blame or anything, so please hear me, but maybe senior leadership is still focused on the main service, that they kind of overlook the children's ministry. They put a leader in there that they trust and say, hey, run with it. But then are they lining up with really what he wants to see happen or her see happen? Parents are under discipled. There's this really weird season right now where we had like 10 years where everybody is like, the millennials are leaving the church. They're leaving the church. Guess what? They're coming back. But a lot of them missed out on those critical years of discipleship. So they went through that whole normal process of deconstruction and figuring out their faith. And now they're coming back, and some of them are still trying to piece this all together. But then they're like, okay, we need our kids to know about Jesus. So they don't know how to disciple their kids. So they're expecting the church to do it. But then we've got all these other factors, right? Fragmented families, parents not making it a priority, all of that stuff. Formation of worldview is broad and early influence of technology. We have kids that are on cell phones from the time that they are born. You will see infants, y'all have seen it, where parents have little music, little videos, little games that kids are playing. They are being influenced by technology and their worldview at a young age. And a lot of parents are not censoring what their kids are watching, what their kids are playing. And so to think about that, that is terrifying. back in the day with my 2 older kids, I didn't have tablets and stuff to contend with. It was pretty much just the TV and music. And I had a way to monitor that. Now we don't have the monitoring like we used to. So a lot of parents struggle with that. And there was a recent research that Barna and Pew Research did where they're saying parents are actually having technology fear and fatigue. The fear piece is because they cannot keep up with everything that is shifting and all these trends, right? And the other piece is fatigue because they're constantly having to stay on top of it. So there's another area that parents are struggling with. Doctrinal and apologetic confusion. There needs to be biblical foundation. We've seen an increase of kids coming and they don't even know the just basic level Bible stories. You could say Jonah in the well, and they're like, what's Jonah in the well? To give an example, we were at camp this last summer, and this guy was, telling the story of David, worshiping, after a victory, he was worshiping and he was just letting it all hang loose. And he was quoting scripture, that David was dancing naked, and the girl started laughing and she's like, there's no way that's in the Bible. And so we showed her, and it was mind blowing. Like some of the stuff that you think that people know about that they don't. One girl I actually transported from camp and for another church, and I didn't know her very well. So we were in the car and we were just talking, and she was like, yeah, I just love camp. And I said, yeah, it was great. And I said, what was one thing that you really learned? And she's like, well, that Jesus guy, he's a really cool guy. And I just love the stories that are in that book. And it was like clicking. She's not getting he's savior, that he's fully God and fully human. So she wasn't grasping who Jesus was. He was just a really cool guy. Yeah, so it's interesting to see the different, hindrance, and even what you guys said, the economy right now, frustrations with finances that parents are dealing with. So next gen discipleship, when you're discipling the next generation, there used to be a model where they would say, back in the day, this was an old model, you would teach the kids and help them memorize scriptures and all of that. And then eventually it would hit their heart, and then they would want to be active and be on mission for the kingdom. That's actually flipped. The Alpha and the Gen Z are very mission focused. They are activists. They want to get involved in everything. And you probably have seen that in the news when there was a social media guy that said he was going to give away this game station, and they just had troves of kids go to this site, and it caused basically a riot. Or you'll see what's going on in the world today. There are activists in courthouse and in the streets that are 20 and younger that we're seeing because they want to be involved. So when we look at the shift in the transformation of how to reach the next generation, what we need to look at is starting with hands first. That's the exposure piece of it, or the behavior dimension. So authentic spirituality always drives us into redemptive involvement with a broken world. So they need experiences outside of their comfort zone and actively participate in serving, and they need to be on mission. So one of the things that we did is we would do a citywide mission, and I would let them decide, hey, what are we going to do? What do you want to do? We're going to do this from this time to this time. And we would have the parents come in. So this is how we connect the dots, bringing the parents in. And we let the kids decide. They were like, we're going to do food bags. We're going to do 50 food bags, and we want to go to random doors. We wouldn't do that today, just telling y'all. And we're going to go to Walmart, and we're going to get gift cards, and we're just going to randomly give them out. Like, they came up with a whole plan with the parents, invested. And then we had a whole night that was citywide mission. After we were done, we came back, and this is the piece that's the heart, experiential heart piece. So the heart is concerned primarily with loving and valuing God. So when we got back to the church, we talked about, what did you see? How did the people respond? What do you think God was trying to tell each of these individuals that you met? And so they started to see the heart of God in giving. The other piece of experiential is they understand how each kid learns, or even parents, and it is kinetic with body movement. That's why worship music is so important. Sports is important. Playing games is important. Interpersonal, this is your small groups, the social piece of it. Auditory, the listen to learn. There's a lot of kids now that are listening to podcasts. I didn't even know that. That's a big thing that's starting to hit. And they even have podcasts on like Spotify for kids. I'm old. I'm really old. But back in the day, we would call in to the library and we'd listen to a storybook on the phone. And so they're actually doing podcasts where they're reading the books. So the kids are going on there and they're just listening to the books. They're not having to watch the video. They're actually starting to like to listen to the books. You got the kids that are the naturalists. They like to be outside, visual, spatial, and musical. If you want more information about that, let me know. Also, then you go to the head, and that's the rational, the dimension of teaching the next generation. This is rooted in the doctrinal revelation of scriptures. So going through the scriptures and really helping them understand the biblical knowledge. And one thing that I always tell next gen leaders, biblical knowledge and knowing scriptures and memorizing scriptures does not equal spiritual maturity. Those are great spiritual practices and things that we want to do because we want to memorize them and apply them to our heart in time of need. But spiritual maturity is a lifelong discipleship journey. So I would like to know, like right now, in your next gen ministries, how do you partner with families in your local church? What are some things that you do to partner with families?
I think it just starts a lot with your just organic relationships with the individual parents and things. So it's like, if I can recognize that so and so's parent just seems not themselves that day or anything like that, it's just about being that like friend to them. Like, hey, have you gotten a lot of rest lately? Do you want me to watch the kids one night? Or, how can I help out? So doing things personally, just to help them, just so they know like you're a safe place and you're someone who's looking after me, like that goes a long way.
Yeah.
Also, I'm a huge resource person. So like even Tammy, like things you've posted on Facebook and stuff, like I eat those things up. So
Yeah.
it's like, I think that might have been the one that I sent. If you posted about it not that long ago, but that unique, one of my parents said, my kid is doing this soap thing, or it was a Bible reading plan, but he's getting too old for it. So I just found that link. I just opened Facebook, found it, and sent it to her. And I think those things do go a long way when they see like, oh, you remembered that I asked that, or you remembered that I needed something and you thought of me when you saw it. So I think those are the things that work best for me, is just being like a friend in general.
Yeah. So a friend, listening, giving, resource, that's huge. So it's relationship focused.
Yeah.
I think this is an area that I am wanting to grow and develop the ministry in. But right now we have a family service one Sunday a month. So
our kids are in with worship, so we're worshiping together, intergenerational, and I think our kids are teaching our adults about worship and the heart of worship. I have some true, genuine worshipers in my group right now. And so I think that's spreading up to the adults. And then also I try to send home a parent page that just says what we talked about, what we were doing, questions they can ask so that conversation can happen amongst the family. And they can all be on, like, we're not divided in, oh, you guys learned this in the main service and this is what we learned in kids church. They can connect through what they learned in kids church as well.
Yeah, that's good. That's good. I like that. And again, that's kind of that resource page, like a resource link that you can do to kind of let them know, hey, this is what happened, like you said. So it's relationship, wanting them involved, but then also letting them know what their children are learning. Okay, those are all really good. So as we move along, we're going to go ahead and I'm going to kind of speed this up. So some tools that you could use for parents. And again, I don't want you to get overwhelmed, but try to discover more about the parents. And that's going to take place when you initiate meeting with the parents, maybe having a parent night, maybe having a kids night, but they bring their parents, kind of like, remember how kids would bring their parents to work. And so having the parents come for a night and making it really fun. I also talk about initiate conversations with the parking lot parents, the foyer parents, invested and absent. The parking lot parents are those that kind of like drop off their kids and just leave and you never see them until they come and pick up the kids. I was very intentional to lean on their doors and like, hey, how are you? How's life going? You know, how's work? And just started to talk to this, and this is an example. I talked to this one woman and she wasn't coming to church. And then one day she showed up to church and she says, well, it's because of you. I got to know you in the parking lot when every time I come and drop my kid off. And then I knew I could come to church because I knew you. So it's relationship bound. The four-year parents, those that just kind of come in and leave. Invested parents are the ones that are highly involved. And then the absent parents, those are the kids that come with other kids. I think those are kind of those missing links that if we could send a letter to them or text them, letting them know, hey, glad your kid was here. Those are some great touches. Support. How can the church support the parents or guardian in different seasons? Is there something going on? I just know of a family that had a baby in a crisis situation and then they're in the NICU. That's where the family can kind of come and wrap around that family during that season of life and bringing meals or an Instacart, just thinking outside of the box. And then creating space. Parent community groups. There was, during some summers, I had a play date Saturdays and they would just bring their kids to a park and we'd all sit at a picnic table and we were going through a discipleship discussion as parents. I was equipping them to do their parenting. Another one that we did was Mommy Mondays, where it was for preschool mothers and they would bring their kids in and the parents, in some of those bigger cities, they have those child and parent play environments where the kids can go and play with their parents. Well, this is where the parents were involved in doing the craft. They were involved in doing the little dance, the little music, involved in reading. I would find a book and they would read the book. And it was maybe only 30 minutes long. And they, were walking through a modeled discipleship piece that they could do at home. They were seeing it done at the church and then they could carry it over into their home. The biggest thing is in this season, moving from parents being partners to encouraging parents that they are the primary. It's important for them to understand that they're the ones that have their child the most amount of time and that they can learn just as much as their kids. and then invest in the next generation in their own family. I found this interesting and I wanted to share it because I've had a couple of people ask me, why is this so important? Why would you bring this up? This was some Pew research, and the US adults of all ages prioritize family time, physical time, nature, but differ in importance. So if you look, the highest valued prioritization is actually spending time with family. And this was just done at the end of 2022. So family is very important during this time. And then the other one is most US teens share their parents' political and religious affiliations. I found this was very interesting because they said, like, Protestant parents, 82% of those kids follow that same faith. But if you look down at the religiously unaffiliated, there's this huge gap. So we see where the parents weigh very heavily in the decision for future belief in Jesus and walking in that life with Jesus. Parents are the main influencer for their children. So we're running out of time, but I did send a sheet of just some ideas. One of the things that I encourage everybody is don't be a person that's always sending things out and asking them to come in and join you. Try to find those creative outlets where you're going out and joining them. And if there's any other follow-up that you guys want to have with me, there are some creative ideas that I've heard from other leaders